So you've probably seen the reports floating around the last week or so, once again with new Nintendo Switch upgrade spec rumors. It's really exciting because I just love the Nintendo Switch. I think it's a great piece of hardware. Even before release, I was excited about it. I had like this childlike excitement about it, and then it came out and I loved it. But there's some things I'd like to see changed. And with all of these rumors talking about a possible new revamp, a pro version, a new iteration, I thought it was time to make a fun little wish list video of stuff I want for the Nintendo Switch. Because, like I said, I love the thing to death. I've had the same one since launch. No problems. Knock on wood. I definitely, and some of you may be the same way if you have the Switch and like one other console or PC or whatever. There are periods where I don't use it as much as I would like to. Like there's a couple times a year where it's like dead for a little while, but then when I go back to using it, every time I do, I just fall in love again. It's awesome. Now, the new Bloomberg report talks about an upgraded GPU, using DLSS, talks once again about the OLED screen, more sources confirming that. I'll get to that. First thing right off the bat, can we just acknowledge something? Can they call it the Super Nintendo Switch? I mean, like I feel like that's easy money. I know they're not going to do it, but I also don't know if they're just going to go and call it the Switch Pro either. I think Nintendo, and I'm going to like probably hit on this point again throughout this video, Nintendo's weird. They're unconventional. They are a very traditional Japanese company, but even from that sense, they can be kind of unpredictable at times. And if there's one thing I can predict, I feel like they might botch the name or come up with some weird cockamamie crazy name. Either way, I'm here for the ride, but I think I'm formally voting they should call it the Super Nintendo Switch. Now, if we're talking a wish list, a couple things I want hardware wise, I think there's a couple of basic things that might be obvious to a lot of you guys. Stuff that I remember touching back on even like the original review when I did the game ranks before you buy. Number one, I actually use the kickstand. I would love to see it be a better kickstand. I know there are peripherals, I know there are upgrades that have made it better, but if just could have a little bit more of a premium kickstand, that would be nice. The other thing is the port on the bottom right here. This can be a bitch sometimes. It can be extremely problematic depending on the situation you're using this thing, if you're trying to charge it while playing, what have you. That stuff's all obvious, but acknowledging the more recent reports and the stuff where it's gonna be maybe like 7-inch screen, OLED panel, I, for one, do not have a problem with OLED panels. I know people are concerned about burn-in and stuff like that, and as somebody who uses an OLED as their main TV, I completely understand. Also, as someone who has major anxiety, but also the Vita OLED screen was like the best thing ever. So I think it's a wise decision for the Switch, especially if they're going with Samsung panels. They're typically one of the main providers for this, so that makes sense. The thing I'm more curious to see is the larger size, the 7-inch size. I don't want to see the footprint of the Switch increase. Now, what I'm hoping they do is do some cell phone trickery, where this sucker has a massive bezel, as you can see. I say massive, that's like, relax, but seriously, there is a notable bezel here, so if they can improve the screen size by simply removing those bezels, I would like that very much, and I think that's a big win. Which that kind of also leads me to design cues. I also reviewed the Switch Lite. Fell in love with the device. From a design standpoint, I think it's absolutely gorgeous. It's more comfortable to use, visually more appealing, a little bit more comfortable. Like I like it a lot, but in terms of use cases, I am the person that actually takes advantage of the Switch hybrid functionality. I use it docked about 50% of the time. Sometimes I use it portably. I use it for travel a lot. Then other times I just kick back on the couch and play Stardew Valley for 400 hours. So if they could somehow harness the concept, the design philosophy behind the Switch Lite and do that with the Switch Pro or whatever you're going to call it. What are you doing? I think the Switch Pro could benefit from that visual overhaul. I know it's just aesthetics. It doesn't really mean anything, but it would still be cool. It would still be nice to see, which leads me to the Joy-Cons. I definitely want to... Okay, go. Ow. Oh. The Joy-Cons are kind of the elephant in the room. Obviously, number one, if you're even redesigning this thing slightly, fix a Joy-Con drift. Can we just like have that completely prevented? Can we work this out, Nintendo? Because that... Come on. guys. But I think a lot of people are going to have big needs and wants for the Switch Pro Joy-Cons, but I don't think Nintendo's going to be in the position to majorly overhaul them, just because I think they're still going to want to have some compatibility with regular Switch, if that makes sense. I don't see them fragmenting things too much. Now, there have been patents floating around for them to add kind of like a D-pad. There had been some design documents where there is a D-pad prototype in the Joy-Con, which I approve of that. I like that. Although it does go away, it kind of steps away from that original concept of the Switch being the shareable two things. One, having a D-pad, I still think is a big benefit, especially for me personally. I love the novel idea of popping them off and handing them to other people you know, but I use that here and there, but compared to everything else I use this thing for, it's super small. So I wouldn't mind if these things were designed to not be handed off one-on-one. I don't think adding a D-pad would be too big of a deal and throw things off. I think that they are going to have similar rail systems, so they maybe fit in controllers and accessories. But what I would really like to see is slightly improved ergonomics. I know this is another thing where accessories fix these things, grips, those types of things, case mods fix these types of things, but in terms of just built-in, ready to go, I would love to see a slight improvement. I would like the Joy-Cons to really feel like they cost $70, because they're really expensive, and if there is just a slight indentation on the back that doesn't really hurt the overall philosophy of using it like this at the same time, just slight ergonomics to it, I would really like that. Another thing I would really like if we're talking Switch Pro, right, the dock is something that I would want to see majorly overhauled. Now, this might tie into the fact that the rumors suggest this is going to be using a new NVIDIA chipset, so improved memory, CPU, GPU, whole 9 yards, possibly embracing DLSS, but with more power, of course, comes more space needed, more cooling needed, more airflow, everything, different power. So plugging a Nintendo Switch into a dock now as it exists does something, but I'm curious to see if the next generation dock will do more, will power the Nintendo Switch in different ways to give you more Ks on the screen, resolution. You get more Ks, you know what I mean? But if we're still talking on design philosophy, first and foremost, like the dock itself, the current Nintendo Switch dock, which is really fun to mod, by the way, just is kind of like a cheap piece of plastic with a tiny little circuit board in it. I would love for it to just feel a bit more substantial, have a little bit more weight to it, because when you slide the thing in and pull it out, sometimes like it kind of just, the dock isn't like heavy enough. So I would like to see stuff like that, maybe more ports. I don't know, something. I'm not the designer, but I would like to see a little bit more oomph to the dock, considering it's a big part, probably like at least 60% of the thing I use the Switch with. But the graphics thing, moving over to that, that is interesting for them to actually be pursuing possibly more power, DLSS to upscale to possibly compete with 4K televisions and other consoles. And the Bloomberg report suggested it in an interesting way, and I like their way of thinking, honestly. So Nintendo, at least as far as I've thought about Nintendo, they've never really tried to chase the dragon constantly, just cutting edge graphics, stumbling over to get the newest, hottest, sexiest thing out the door. I think they've always kind of focused on, I wouldn't even say affordability, because their games are still really expensive, but some sort of affordability, usability, ease of access, simplicity. So while there was time periods where, yes, maybe Nintendo was at the cutting edge of graphics at the moment, I think overall it hasn't always been like their main priority, the thing that they've been chasing. They've been chasing the games, to design the form factor, the fun factor first. But I think it's interesting that this could potentially change a little bit with how they are going forward with this. The Bloomberg report suggests that like they're not just trying to like get beefy, cool graphics, have a 4K Nintendo Switch on your TV, but more in the hopes of bringing over more third-party developers, realizing that them embracing some third-party developers over the Switch has been good, and that they need to continue doing that down the line. I think is really cool, especially just seeing that they are finally learning from how they kind of awkwardly handled it with the Wii, and then really kind of tried and with the Wii U. Now, more than ever, third-party support on the Switch feels closest to normal, like anything like a game, like you find out an indie game is coming to your PlayStation 4 or Xbox or vice versa, whatever. Nintendo Switch has been pretty good with the amount of games that are on it, but there are limitations because of the hardware. Case in point, most recently, I think Apex Legends would be something that would be fantastic on this, but it's a little weak. It's a little rough because of the limitations. So it's like they're right there. Yeah, Fortnite's great on it, but like a lot of other third-party games are going to start struggling more and more down the line, especially now that the Switch is pretty deep into its life cycle. So I think this marks like kind of an interesting shift because like they are maybe pursuing the tech, pursuing the hardware, pursuing the graphical tech behind it a little more aggressively, but it's for a reason. It's for more third-party support to kind of entice, to woo more developers because they would be working on a machine that's still fairly on the level of PCs, PlayStation, Xbox, stuff like that. I still think like at the end of the day, like Nintendo with developing their games for their hardware, it's still best, and I don't think they need to have beefed up graphics or DLSS or anything like that. But I'm not going to complain if I could get like 4K 60 HDR Switch games by any means. The biggest thing, though, the biggest question, man, are we going to be able to get this? So the Bloomberg report suggests that this is going to be a holiday 2021 thing. Nintendo has been extremely quiet about this. They've even come out and say, hey, we have no plans of announcing anything like this anytime soon. So what's the deal? These rumors are starting to come in big time. So it's seemingly more and more real. But the big question is, with how everything has been going on, and there's chipset scarcity, there's almost like a drought in terms of some of the hardware out there. I know people out there trying to buy graphics cards probably understand that, but it seems like it's been translating over to a lot of other things, and presumably it'll happen with this. So if a Switch is available this holiday season, it could be a shit show, it could be a disaster. And what I would see Nintendo do, them more than ever, because I feel like they really would rely on a holiday season, they might opt to push it if they don't have enough available units. And that might be the conflicting thing with the report that says it might be coming. I mean, especially with the OLED report suggesting that like they are being shipped to the manufacturers and being implemented during the summer. But I'm like really stumbling through things now. I don't know what's going to happen. I just hope that if it does launch this summer, I hope that the people that want them can get their hands on them. And I hope we don't have a scalping nightmare like we've had with PlayStation 5, because that would suck ass. But these are the things that I want from the next Nintendo Switch, the Switch Pro, the Super Switch, But I want to know what you guys are thinking, because I think this is a fun conversation. Obviously, what is your wish list, your realistic wants for a new Switch, but also in terms of them pursuing graphics, availability for the holidays, all of those more hot topics. I want to know what you're thinking in that regard too. So let me know both things. But thank you for coming around and listening. I love talking about this stuff. So if you appreciate what I'm trying to do here, just talk about stuff I love, clicking the like button is seriously the best way you can help me out. Thank you. But thank you for watching. I'm Jake Baldino. You can subscribe because video games.